First of all, I'm glad to be here. My name is Kyagulanyi Ssentamu. That's my real name. But when I got into entertainment, I adopted the nickname Bobi Wine. I do many things. I studied to be an entertainer, and I'm an entertainer. I'm a musician, songwriter, actor, and I also do other kinds of work, casual work. However, because I was dissatisfied of what's going on and I was tired of waiting for somebody else to come and fix it for me, I went into politics and I was elected into the Parliament of Uganda in an election that I will not describe as free or fair, because that's not the character of our elections. Yeah, it wasn't free and fair, but we overwhelmed the regime. There was a lot of intimidation. The president invested more than 8 billion shillings to make sure he buys the voters, but we overwhelmed the regime and I turned out to be the member of parliament. My overwhelming support, and indeed the support of many other leaders that share the same mindset with me, is evident of the sentiment on ground, the sentiment of despair, the sentiment of frustration. Uganda is primarily a young country where we have more than 80% under the age of 35. That means more than 80% of our population is younger than me, although I also consider myself a young person. And indeed, it is that percentage that is over 80% unemployed. The exclusion has been rampant and all that. So the Ugandan people, mainly the young people, are speaking out. They're speaking out through the leaders, although they are limited with leaders. So the people are speaking out in all ways they could. And that explains my rise. But again, it explains the constant fear of the regime. So what's going on in Uganda today is the effort by the government to make sure they crush any voices of dissent, both politically and socially. I definitely agree with Dr. King. All over the world, Dr. King continues to be the inspiration, to be the embodiment of the values that we fight for. Now, the only difference is that Dr. King and his colleagues were being oppressed because of their color. Yeah. It is even worse to see that in Uganda, even after the end of colonialism, we are being colonized by our fellow black people, who are being oppressed by our fellow black people. And that is absurd. However, with constant reminders and inspirations like Dr. King, like Nelson Mandela, we realize that a life that is not lived free, a life that is not lived freely, is not worth living. And indeed, Nelson Mandela told it to us when he said that he has always cherished the idea of liberty and freedom. There's an idea that he's hoping to live for, but if necessary, it's an idea that is ready to die for. I said it personally some while ago after being arrested and tortured by the military, which is supposed to be me together with 4 other members of parliament who were brutally arrested by the military. I was charged in the military court, even if I'm not a soldier, and I was framed. The government said that I had 2 machine guns, a claim that they later dropped. But however, I said it, that this and more, we expected it in this struggle for dignity and life. Okay, I said it, that we must get our freedom or we shall die trying to get our freedom. Sure, this is completely a non-violent struggle. We don't believe in violence. When I was 4 years ago, President Museveni took over power with a group of young people using guns. But it shouldn't be noted that Uganda lost more than 500,000 people. More than 500,000 people were killed in the war started by President Museveni because he was promising better. 33 years later, he does not want to be reminded of the things that he said. It's remembered that on the day when he sworn in as president, as ex-rebel chief, he said Africa's problem, and Uganda in particular, are the leaders that overstand power. 33 years ago, when we people like myself, who are 4 years old when he came in, were fathers and soon to be grandfathers. So we despise violence. We want to differ from Museveni because we believe that a change that is peacefully attained and a change that people get together as a people is a change that will never be personalized and owned by one person. because President Museveni gained power by use of force and violence, by using the gun, that is what has made him hold us hostage. Our problem is socio-economic. Apart from this, the politics, you'll notice like that more people are sliding into poverty. It was showed by the Uganda National Bureau of Statistics that more than 2 million people have slid into poverty in the recent times. And indeed, because there's so much economic injustice and economic inequality, you'll see that many of Uganda's young people are being shipped out of the country into self-enslavement, where they lose their dignity, but because there's no work around here. And indeed, even where the work is, even the government funds are being siphoned and stolen in broad daylight. So even the blatant corruption itself, which is cited right from the president's office, is a big economic misdeed to our people. So much as we are trying to achieve political freedom, we also want economic freedom. We also want social freedom, simply because the regime has very smartly impoverish the people, well knowing that patronage is their way of holding people on their side. My conviction is that we are not going to see any change unless if we change the people who are in office, because much as we have a constitution, much as we have the law, much as we have institutions, they don't function because all power has been concentrated in the hands of the president, which president goes ahead to use it as a patronizing weapon, employing only his family members and only his tribe members and close friends. And that is all that we can change at the ballot box. Why? Because we believe that if we sensitize all these people to come out and speak through their voice, they will put an end to the corruption through their vote. They'll put an end to military rule through their vote. They'll put an end to economic injustice through their vote. My vision is a country that makes sense for everybody, that benefits everybody, that offers equal opportunities for everybody. Lucky enough, we have an endowed country. Originally, Uganda has always been an agricultural country, and agriculture has been supported in the past, supported even better during colonial governments, you see. So if we want Uganda to function, then we've got to make it possible for the rural people by empowering their agriculture. We are going to make life fair for all people. We're going to make, all people accountable. We're going to make, put in place ways that make people benefit from everything they're doing. For example, agriculture can be improved. But again, not only agriculture, we've got to also empower the traders. We've got to, as government, create market for the agricultural produce like it was in the past. We've got to create the right infrastructure like it was in the past. You see, everything that we want to achieve in Uganda has been achieved before. It was there. When I move in the rural areas, I see the defunct cooperative institutions that used to help the farmers. We see how the schools used to function that don't function anymore. We see how hospitals used to function that don't function anymore. So we believe that just by retracting our steps, by looking at the mega plan and how it used to work, we can reinvent it, we can re-accelerate it, and we can make it work again, because it has ever been functional. It's not that we are hypothetically thinking. No, we are only remembering what was happening here in Uganda, and we want it to work again. It's unfortunate that our leaders would rather not see the country function, because it's much more comfortable for them to sell us to other communities, like selling us to the Chinese and all these other foreigners, because that makes us more enslaved and more accountable to the Chinese and these other foreigners, who are in turn accountable to the leaders. Man, it is humbling and overwhelming to imagine the kind of responsibility and the kind of hope that fellow young people have in us. But I always say to them, like I'm going to say to them now, it is not only about me. I want to be the uniting factor of all this energy and the ideas. We have young men and women who are incredibly talented, who are incredibly intelligent. We have been coming together with them, and I continue to seek to come together with them so we can together paint a blueprint of the country that we want to live in. I might have the zeal, I might be resolved to fight for what we want, but it won't take only me, it will take the hearts and passion and ideas of all of us to bring them together and draw a blueprint of the kind of country that we want to age in, the kind of country that we want our children and our children's children to inherit. It has been like that. Ugandans have always been intelligent, and indeed, looking at our past, Ugandans have always been educated. Yes, many more Ugandans are educated because we are much more, but even looking at the quality of education, our people have been mainly educated to be job seekers, not job creators. Unlike countries like Cuba and all these other countries, Uganda, we do not export skilled labor. We export unskilled labor. It is so embarrassing to see that we export housemaids and house helps because the Arabian Peninsula wants this is more like forced slavery, because we know, we get reports of what our sisters and brothers are going through, the kinds of physical and sexual abuses that they are enduring. But again, they don't get help from the government because they are treated more like a good riddance from Uganda. So I would not really credit the government for the kind of education they're giving our people. I strongly believe that considering the huge number of young people we have, we could skill them. And if we're to export labor, we should export skilled labor. Just like we import the Cuban doctors, we should be exporting Ugandan doctors and Ugandan engineers. I'm worried that what was supposed to be an oil blessing could otherwise turn into an oil curse. That's if it's not already turned into a curse. We have a president who has been in power for 33 years and counting. But again, it's the same president that makes an assertion like, this is my oil. So we have a president that actually is convinced that he owns the country's natural resources. So the more we are exposed to natural resources, is the more terror we are exposed to, because wherever there's a natural resource to benefit from the country, there is danger at the hands of the president. Well, our potentials have certainly not been maximized because we've not made those efforts as government. It is clear that the biggest preoccupation of the regime in Uganda is to maintain the grip on power. And that is why we've not had any railway connections with our sister nations, with our neighbors. We've not had any moral connection with our neighbors. And even recently, when we were trying to connect as young people from across the borders, you realize that our fellow leaders from Kenya were blocked from entering Uganda because they are seen as a threat. So our government here in Uganda is operating more on fear than on hope. They are scared of the connection with our neighbors because they think that we will be inspired by the change that is going on in various countries like Kenya. So the regime here would rather have us locked, would rather make us believe that we are landlocked rather than believing that we are land connected. Besides Uganda being enormously endowed, with natural resources, like you say, we have fruits. Man, it's amazing how many fruits or foods we have. But yeah, many times I'm convinced to believe that this is the true Garden of Eden. But that being said and that being known, we know that our problem is not the people, because everything is there. You'll note that Uganda was recently ranked the most entrepreneurial country. You know, this is where the biggest number of businesses are started. But Again, this is where the biggest number of businesses fail. And this is because most of the businesses don't see their fifth birthday. Why? Because the government, the leadership does not make it any easier. This is the only country where you're going to be taxed for just starting a business or for registering a business. And that, on that, there's a bill, a startup bill that I hope to introduce to Parliament, hoping to address the challenge. However, I must also note that our Parliament has constantly degenerated into only a talk show, because much as we talk about these things, it's more of just a talk show. I'll say that because that is the truth. If we go and talk about things and resolve on behalf of our people, and then what we deliberate is not respected, if I don't call it a talk show, I beg to find a better word to use. Recently, when I was blocked from constitutionally practicing my profession, I went to Parliament, and Parliament resolved that it was illegal and unconstitutional for the police to stop me from practicing my profession. Guess what? The resolution of Parliament was disrespected. And not only that, I mean, sometimes we are always sometimes we're in Parliament deliberating, and the military will attack Parliament and beat up all members of Parliament. Well, I beg to inform you that Uganda is a country, Uganda under Museveni is a country where things, despicable things will happen, and they are swept under the carpet. Many high-profile people have been murdered in broad daylight, and no single report has been given. On the day when I was tortured, I was brutally arrested, and my driver was killed. It was an assassination attempt on my life. And no sooner had I walked out of the car that the military, particularly the section of the military that's charged with guarding the president, the Special Forces Command, they fired at my driver. They murdered my driver in cold blood. And guess what? The president tapped them on the back. No single report has ever been released. Not only me, many other members of Parliament were tortured, but no report was given. So that is, in a way, trying to answer your question, that no report is ever going to be given by the government of Uganda about the brutal torture. Ideally, they are supposed to have that power. As per our constitution, the Parliament is mandated. It has those powers. But, like I said, Uganda under Museveni is an illegal entity. Okay? Uganda under Museveni is a lawless state, because the president himself, using his mouth, told the Parliament that even if they investigated, they could not do anything to the army. This was the president of the country telling off the Parliament of the country. So it is important for us to first and foremost realize that we are in a country of lawlessness. First of all, our military is not conducting itself in a professional manner. It's a sectarian military. It's a brutal military. These are the same soldiers that brutalized me, you know. So it's certainly not professional at all. I'll also mention this, that President Museveni has presented himself to the international community as the only beckoning of hope, as the only anchor of stability in the Great Lakes region. And that is how he has been able to blackmail the country and also lie to the international community. And by threatening to unleash instability to the region, he has been able to pull the strings and keep the international community believing in him as a person. I've raised it before, and I want to raise it now, that our development partners and the international community should deal with Ugandans and not Museveni, should deal with Ugandan institutions and not Ugandan individuals, because Uganda is going to be here much longer than Museveni, and it will be so much of a risk to anchor the stability of a country, and indeed the stability of the region, on an individual rather than institution. It would be terrible for the people, the taxpayers of the United States of America to be in connection with an individual other than the people of the Republic of Uganda. I respect the fact that the United States deals with a duly elected person, but I also recognize the fact that the US government has values that they stand for. And that is why the US government stopped dealing with people like Gaddafi and Saddam when they lost their credibility and legitimacy. The United States, I believe, has noted the human rights abuses that have been ongoing in Uganda. For example, in Kasese, where more than 150 people, including men, women, and children, were killed. I'm sure the United States government has been taking note of the blatant election riggings. I'm sure the United States government has been taking note of all the human rights abuses. And I know that the US has a Magnitsky clause that warrants for their disconnected engagement with the people that are not complying with their value system. And that's what Uganda is doing. So our humble hope and prayer to the United States administration is that they do not continue being partners in crime. They should deal with Uganda to do the right thing in the benefit of the people of Uganda, not in the benefit of one individual. So I'm inspired by the freedom fighters that came before me. I did not start this. I born into this, and when I see oppression, I talk about oppression. I was greatly inspired by people like Bob Marley, people like Fela Kuti, and I hope that I also inspire those that come after me. In a way, agree with them, but I go further to tell them that that's a wrong statement. You know, indeed, Bobi Wine cannot oust Museveni because it's not about Bobi Wine. I don't represent Bobi Wine here. I represent people power. I represent the energy that connects all the oppressed people of Uganda. And if they said that the people of Uganda cannot oust Museveni, I would vehemently disagree with them. It is not a Bobi Wine thing. We are not acting as Bobi Wine. We are going to act as the people of Uganda. And I can guarantee to you that we as the people of Uganda, particularly the young generation, we can and we will put an end to the Museveni dictatorship. Say this many times. I communicate verbally and I miss out on communicating musically, and yet over the years communicating musically has been able to even make my point more clearly. So I'll just say this on behalf of the people of Uganda, that we are living in a time similar to the one of slave trade. This oppression is worse than apartheid. The gun is the master and the citizen slave. The pearl of Africa is bleeding. Question: what is the purpose of the what was the purpose of the liberation when we can't have a peaceful transition? What is the purpose of the constitution when the government disrespect the constitution? Where is my freedom of expression when you charge me because of my expression? See what you're doing to our nation. What are you teaching the future generation? See, our leaders become misleaders, and see, our mentors become tormentors. Freedom fighters become dictators. They look at the youth and say, we are detractors. We are fighting for freedom.